Welcome everyone to Charts Free webinar series. Today we have Jim Sullivan presenting on Multi-Unit Leadership 2021. Welcome, Jim, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. Look forward to this. I appreciate everyone being on our webinar today. I know that more people are joining. I can see the participant numbers rise, but I want to get into the program right away because I respect your time. Time is more precious than money because you can get more money, you can't get more time. So let's get right on into it. We've got about 35 or 40 minutes of content that I want to share with you today. We'll leave it open for Q&A at the end, of course. But the topic, as you can see on the screen, Multi-Unit Leadership 2021. 5 best practices of above store leaders in this new normal. So what has happened in the last year? A lot, of course, but how has that affected leadership? Some of you know from personal experience that it's impacted you in dramatic ways. Some of you have realized it really doesn't seem to have impacted or changed or transformed that much, but indeed across our industries it really has. Any business that was showing strains or not solid in its performance before the pandemic hit, well, the pandemic exacerbated all those problems. It created fissures or cracks in the system. And companies that were strong on team development, strong on leadership, not only survived the pandemic, but came out on the other side stronger. So I want to look at today, what were the things that made that leadership come out stronger? And what are the 5 things we can boil that down to based on our research that I can share with you today? That's my goal, and I'd like to get into the program right now. So for those of you who don't know much about me, I'll explain very quickly. I've worked for and with companies that include Panera, Disney, Starbucks, Chili's, and others. And I'm the author of 2 books, Multi-Unit Leadership and Fundamentals. And if you don't have a copy of them, please rush out in a buying frenzy after this webinar today and pick one up at Amazon or bookstores. Remember, bookstores? It's available in bookstores as well. And we've done research over the last 10 years on multi-unit leadership. And the research that we've done has ended up in both of our books. And we've created a brand new website that many of you may or may not be familiar with called multiunitleadership.com. And of course, our other website, if you're familiar with it, is sullivision.com. So I would encourage those of you who are multi-unit leaders, above store leaders right now, to take advantage of all the free resources available at those websites and the community that's available at both those websites. So you can interact, you can share best practices, you can find best practices with your fellow above store leaders and multi-unit franchisees. Later in the program, we'll talk about a brand new e-learning program called Multi-U 2.0 as well. These are some of the companies we work with that we've designed leadership training programs for, service, sales training, marketing programs for, and we've also worked with them all on multi-unit leadership development. So as you can see, it's kind of a who's who of brands out there. And those of you visiting us today and joining us today in the retail world, you'll see that while these are mostly food service clients, we do a lot of work in retail as well with companies that include Target, Kohl's, Walmart, Sam's Club, and others. So we're going to pull the best practices from all those folks and their lessons in leadership that we've learned this last year and shared in this presentation today. So about 10 years ago, I wrote a book called Multi-Unit Leadership, as I mentioned. In that book, we began by interviewing and polling and researching 1,200 above store leaders in both food service and retail multi-unit leadership roles. And we asked them what their best practices were and what their better practices were. More on the difference between those two in just a minute. Once we heard of their best practices, we also asked them, what did you not know that you wish you did know when you began the job? And we start compiling all that insight, and we realize they sort of fit the best practices and the insight they wish they had and the characteristics of a great high-performing above store leader. They sort of fit into 7 buckets, 7 areas, and I would like to share those with you today. Number 1, the first step is brand ambassador. This is someone who knows the way, shows the way, and goes the way. They act like the brand. A brand ambassador, multi-unit leader is someone that anybody in the company could say, Do you see her? That's who we are. See how she acts, see how she is. That's really what our brand is all about. So this brand ambassador is like the first stage of a great multi-unit leader. Number 2 is a talent scout. This is someone who builds leadership capacity. They make hiring the most important decision. And they understand that developing their people is the key to their success, because companies don't build brands, they build people. People build companies. So if you understand that, you understand how important the talent scout role is. Talent scout role is a little bit harder than being a brand ambassador. Each of these stages gets a little bit more challenging as you go up the ladder. Third is a servant leader. Cheesecake Factory says it best: my customer is anyone who isn't me. That probably tells you all you need to know about the role of servant leadership as far as a topic sentence, but there's so much more depth to what a servant leader is and does. We'll address some of it today. Since we have a short webinar, I'll direct you to other resources you can look at that can give you a deeper dive if you so choose. Next step is head coach. For any trainers we have on the webinar today, and I presume that's anybody that's on the webinar today, because, right, I mean, what is a great multi-unit leader, above store leader, or multi-unit franchisee? They're also a great coach. So what is a coach? Think about the best ones you've seen in the sports world and you've seen in business. They're brilliant at the basics. They teach the team how to think and not just what to do. This is a topic sentence I'd like all of you to consider and underline. All too often, when I see what happens with people training and developing and creating programs for multi-unit leaders, they train to a process. They tell them what to do. Rarely do they teach them how to think. Critical thinking skills, as you know, in this last year have become paramount. We were hit with a global pandemic that most people, almost everyone, didn't see coming. It affected everyone slightly differently. And if you didn't have critical thinking skills, adaptability, and resilience, you were left behind. So a head coach not only knows these things, knows how to be brilliant at the basics, knows how to think, but they also set the tone for the team each and every day by making them better. The next phase, the next stage that we developed, that we identified, number 5, is marketing guru. A marketing guru multi-unit leader has an ABM mindset. That means always be marketing, always be marketing. They know how to connect the community to each one of their stores or restaurants. They're self-competitive. They ask themselves, if I were the competition, how would I put me out of business? And then they shore up their strengths, minimize their weaknesses, and try to be better than they were the day before, which is a great lesson. You don't have to be best in class. You just have to improve from yesterday or last week and continuously improve. So again, you don't have to be the best. Just make sure there's incremental improvement in place every week and your team is moving one step forward together. Synergist. This is probably the most difficult stage. It's the 6th one. This involves the concepts of situational leadership. Synergist is someone who takes all the previous stages and they apply it appropriately to the situation. You know, situational leadership is not something that I came up with. It's been around since the early 1960s, and it's been developed and promoted by leadership gurus along the way. But at the heart of situational leadership is this notion that leadership is not generic. You apply a different skill to the situation as necessary and to the person as necessary. Because not everybody that you lead is a glass of water that's half full. Some are 3/4 full, some are 1/4 full. And you have to know, based on the situation, where do you add value? Where do you develop them? Where do you help them get better? Ultimately, if you're really a good multi-unit leader, ironically, you build your own replacement. So a synergist really knows where to apply the insight that's appropriate for that time to move the business forward and to make that person that they're leading get better as well. The other thing a synergist does is they're awesome at high impact store visits, which we'll address later. This is where many above store leaders fail or struggle, I should say. When they visit their restaurants or their stores, they come in and they do not act in a way that moves the business forward. So we'll talk about what that is in just a bit. Finally, the goal getter. They're disciplined, they're accountable, they own it, they're on it. So this is, you notice it doesn't say go-getter. A go-getter is about energy and activity. A goal-getter is someone who obviously attains their targets and what they're aiming for. So if you reflect on these, and these are all detailed in the book, if you have my book, or if you go to multiunitleadership.com, you'll see this in a little bit of a deeper dive. As I indicated earlier, brand ambassador is easier. It gets a little bit harder as you go up the scale in terms of, assuming these skills and getting really good at them. Also notice that these are linear, but they're fluid, right? You would be using marketing guru in one store, you'd be a servant leader, maybe across all the stores. You'd use your talent scout competencies in a different store with the different leaders. So you can see again that while they're linear, they're also fluid and situational. But these are the seven that we've identified. These are the 5 lessons we've learned in the last year based on our research with the companies we work with. So number one, what other skills, and these would fit into the 7 stages I just shared with you, but the 5 areas that really kind of made themselves known is a great multi-unit leader in 2020 was adaptable and resilient. They have long-term optimism, and they were able to manage the transformation of change. 2, they had strategic clarity. Boy, was that critical in the last year. And is that critical going forward? These 5 extra lessons I'm sharing with you today is not something that you would just apply in a pandemic or post-pandemic. These are leadership strategies that are going to make sense for the next 5 to 10 years as well. Number 3, talent density. This involves servant leadership, as we talked about before, and being the talent scout. So talent density is an area we need to address, right? Because staffing is such a big challenge in our business today. Number 4, habitual consistency. What drives our customers crazy? Habitual inconsistency in operations, habitual inconsistency in management. Why is it that we can go into one restaurant on a Tuesday afternoon with our friends as a guest and have a great time, and then come back the next Tuesday with other guests, and the place is dirtier, it's not as efficient, maybe there's not as many people on to help perform and get the job done, but that habitual inconsistency is what drives us crazy. So what multi-unit leaders have learned how to do, since they are setting the shadow of the leader across their restaurants and their stores, they've learned to reduce complexity. That's the first way you improve habitual consistency. And they manage their moments of truth. Finally, 5th one, fierce resolve. Not just a commitment to get things done, but fierce resolve. Continuous improvement, and then backcasting your operation every quarter to get to the goals that you want to attain instead of setting goals that you stumble and can't get to. We'll talk about each of these in detail. Number 1, adaptability and resilience. So one big thing we've seen in this last year is that we've migrated from episodic change to perpetual change, right? Or continuous change. It used to be we'd have change coming at us every now and then, and now it's continuous going forward. This is, you may have heard this before, change with the times or the times will change you, but I like to say that change is inevitable. Growth is a choice. And as I indicated earlier, in the last year, change was inevitable, and some companies grew as a result of it, some shrunk, some crumbled as a result of it. So think about 2020. Everything is the same, right? Until it isn't. So the picture on the left kind of shows how everything was in February of 2020, and then March and April is reflected on the picture on the right, and today as well. So everything seems the same, and then what happens? A radical change, obviously affects everything we do, including our leadership. So in 2020, I think many of the multi-unit leaders on the call will recognize this is what we did. We laid track while the train was running. In general, the QSR segment and fast casual segments of the restaurant business had really good years in 2020, but they had to make it up as they went along because nobody really knew what was coming next. And we were all kind of thrown into the same washing machine. but we came out a little bit differently, as I alluded to at the beginning of the program. Some of us came out stronger. Some of us came out more adaptable and resilient. Some of us did not make it through that wash or even to the rinse cycle. So I guess one of the key learnings of the pandemic is that we were all in the same storm, but we weren't all in the same boat. What did some restaurants do, especially full service restaurants that were forced to close because of governmental restrictions and health considerations in different areas? Well, they understood that, you know what, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to pull our business out of the water. Consider that business to be a ship. Pull it out of the water. And I'm going to paraphrase Danny Meyer's analogy here of, scraping the barnacles, resetting the shaft, the rudder, making it ship worthy and seaworthy again. And some of us didn't have the opportunity to do that. Our businesses kept operating. But we looked at ways that we could improve the system. If we didn't literally take our business out of the water and looked at how we could improve it, we did it figuratively, and we did it in real time going forward. And these are some of the changes that I've identified and we've identified in our research at our company here. The multi-unit leadership transformation between last year and this year. So pre-pandemic, episodic change, post-pandemic, perpetual change. Pre-pandemic, we applied best practices. Post-pandemic, better practices. Let me explain what that means the way I see it. If you have best practices, and I'm a fan of best practices, certainly, but there's a flawed notion behind best practices. For instance, if you want to be, let's say we identify the best practices of Steve Jobs, Apple founder and CEO. And if we identify those best practices, then we teach them to somebody else and we say, hey, here's what he did. And the theory is that if you do these things, you'll be Steve Jobs too. But that's never really how it works. The problem with best practices is they get frozen in place. We don't question them anymore. And while they may have been good for that individual or that time and place, we stop maybe looking at what's current and what's a better practice. So one thing I've seen smart multi-unit leaders do, and something we've advised companies to do, is look at your better practices. Instead of just solving problems, pursue the bright spots, find out what's going on and what people have done currently, what they've done a month ago, 6 months ago, 9 months ago, that you can make part of your system going forward. It shouldn't be static as a best practice, but a better practice is active, something that's ongoing. Multi-unit leaders went from doing their job to thinking their job. Really, multi-unit leadership is a thinking position, not a doing position. And many multi-unit leaders found out in the first few months of the pandemic, they couldn't even go into their restaurants or stores because of health regulations. So they had to rely on whatever development they could do over the phone, over Zoom, or over a webinar to make sure that their people got better. What they found was that a lot of their people got better through what we determine as what we call self-efficacy. They stepped into the storm and they found out, this is what I need to do. They enhanced their leadership potential and their leadership perception and their leadership performance by having to perform in the storm. Self-efficacy. So I think a lot of multi-unit leaders learned, you know what? I developed my people really strong. I gave them the right tools. And even though I couldn't be there to help them along in person, they found ways to get better. I learned from them this time. So the development went both ways. That's a best practice to consider and keep going forward. Instead of just being efficient with their time, multi-unit leaders have learned to be effective with their time. Being efficient with your time in a way is selfish because it means that you're going to cut out certain things so you can use your time more wisely. If you cut out things that do not make you or your team more effective, there's no value in being efficient. So always shoot for being effective more. In the e-learning program I'm going to talk to you about a little bit later, we talk about efficiency versus effectiveness in great detail. If you go to our website at multiunitleadership.com, you can learn more about this. We've gone from technology creep to technology integration. Here's a term that you probably haven't used much, but it's going to be key today and going forward. Digital literacy. look at the impact that tech has had in the last year in our business. And it's not just creeping in, it's fully integrated, getting more integrated. The impact of AI, virtual artificial intelligence, virtual reality, augmented reality. It's an area that we're working deeply in right now. Instead of showing somebody how to make a pizza shoulder to shoulder, let's show them how to do it through a headset. Let's show them how to do it virtually. Same way for making a taco or a burger. There's less waste, more practice time, and more accuracy. So technology integration with third-party apps and all the things that happened in this last year means that our multi-unit leaders have to have digital literacy as well as their GMs. So we've gone from staffing in lowercase to staffing in uppercase, right? That's a big problem. I'll address it as quickly as or not as quickly, shortly in this presentation. We've gone from coaching for performance to coaching for development. If coaching for performance is really sort of a narrow focus, okay, I want you to do this, I'll show you how to do this, but I want you to be better at what you do. Coaching for development is really looking at long-term employee value. I want to develop you not just as a worker, as an employee, but as a person too. That way you're better, not only for our company, but for your family, for our community as well. So there's a difference there between performance and coaching for development. Hopefully you understand that difference. And if not, we'll go into a little more detail shortly. We've gone from a traditional workforce and we're moving into a hybrid workforce. Yeah, as AI takes over more jobs and artificial and augmented reality, virtual reality comes into our businesses and robots come to work with us, multi-unit leaders will be looking at, and GMs will be looking at supervising a hybrid workforce. You know, a robot really doesn't care about leadership development. A robot just needs electricity, for instance, or batteries. So given that, how will leadership evolve? That's a whole other webinar, one that I'm very excited about, but I just want to leave you with that thought today. All right, so let's look at our 5 areas, shall we? So we can keep or our second area, so we can keep moving. Number 2, strategic clarity. That means getting the big rocks in place and reducing complexity wherever you can. Strategic clarity is key because what got you here may not get you there. If you're a multi-unit leader, multi-unit franchisee on this webinar today, recognize that the strategy changes with scale. You may have had the skills to be successful at this point, but the skills going forward are going to be a little bit more demanding on your time, your perspective, your mindset, and your current skill sets. Go on to the next one. So where's what kind of compass do we have to get us forward? Well, I guess a good question. Look, first of all, you see the question there, what will change in the next 10 years? I don't have a crystal ball. You can't predict the future, which is why you never see a headline that says psychic wins lotto, right? So I get asked this question a lot. As some of you know on the call, I write a monthly column for Nation's Restaurant News. I contribute to a column in Fast Company. I contribute to New York Times, USA Today, and Wired, and a few other magazines. And often I get on these calls and people ask, well, what will change in the next 10 years? And that's certainly an interesting and valid question. So it's a quicker answer. What's going to change? Tech, of course, all technology, how we hire, supply chains, robotics, as I indicated earlier, and a new generation of leaders are coming into our business, and they'll be looking at business completely different, and they'll transform business. But what's an even more interesting question that nobody ever asks is what won't change in the next 10 years? And I think that's important for us as leaders to think about and consider, because if you consider what won't change in the next 10 years or 5 years, you can build a business strategy around the things that remain stable, right? And it's fun to think about the future. It's fun to anticipate it, and we should anticipate it. But what things won't change? Well, my short list would be quality, speed, accuracy, people development, and leadership development. So what if we can get better at those things if they're not going to change in the next 5 to 10 years? So that's another leadership development that I would like to suggest might be important to add to your tool sets and your mindsets over the next year or so, or certainly after this program. Questions are the answers. Questions are the answers. And I think that really good multi-unit leaders understand that. The common questions that you might want to ask, and this is your homework. I can't do this for you, but something you might ask is, why do some of my teams outperform other teams doing the exact same work? Another question, what do my most successful multi-unit leaders do on a regular basis that my unsuccessful ones do not? What do my most successful GMs do on a regular basis that my least successful ones do not? Answering those questions and making a list of that allows you to improve your strategic clarity about what you need to focus on, what needs less emphasis and what needs more emphasis. And then the biggest question of all, my favorite one, is how can we become the kind of company that would put us out of business? How do we become the kind of company that would put us out of business? 3 questions for you to ask yourself and answer. Your homework, if you will. Another way to create strategic clarity is to look through the right end of the telescope. And I think a lot of companies really just had that inverted, and they were looking straight down at what was going on, and they realized we're just in the middle of chaos, and they let their actions be chaotic as well. Zoom out, look at the bigger picture, which we're doing today for you, and then zoom in and look at how you can apply those lessons from the outside to improving your own business. An example, here's a very granular example of a shared vision. A multi-unit leader should ask their GMs, each of their GMs, send me 6 photos of what a clean restaurant looks like, and send me 2 videos from your smartphone of a great pre-shift meeting. So if each manager, let's say you oversee 6 stores, each manager sends you 6 different photos. You have 36 photos now. You can compare those and say, okay, these 4 managers absolutely get it. Those are clean. These 2 managers, look at the background there. That's not as clean. These 5 managers absolutely get what a pre-shift meeting should look like, how impactful it should be. This one doesn't quite get it. And you might use pictures to illustrate that. For instance, if you wanted to have clarity on portioning, on the left is not proper, and on the right it is proper. This is an example of how pictures can share someone's understanding of what your goals are, of what your expectations are. Last question to ask yourself in terms of strategic clarity: what exactly does success look like? If my restaurants were ideal, what would they look like? How would we know when we got there? Right? How would people be acting? Who'd be working here? Who wouldn't be working here? What's the gap between right now and that ideal future? Identify the top 3 to 5 priorities. Ask yourself what's most important that we do right now as a team, and who on my team must do what by when. Are they clear on what they need to do? The other way to create strategic clarity is to consider something I call the 25, 50, and 1. Let's look at a typical restaurant. So at the top, we'll see, okay, so you have 275,000 customers, left side, check average $10. Your annual unit volume is 2.75 million. If you oversee 6 units, you generate 16.5 million. The second column means, what if we could get 25 new customers a week, 100 more per month, 1,200 more per year? You see your annual customer count has risen by 1,200 people. Your check average stays the same. Look what happens to your annual unit volume. So across 6 units, that's raised and has risen $72,000. Look at the bottom now, 25, 50, and 1. Here's the 50 part. What if you could raise your sales just 50 cents per person, right? That's a $5 appetizer sold to every 10th customer, a $3 large beverage sold to every 6th customer. Doable goal. Look what happens to your numbers. Here's strategic clarity in all its glory. It also shows you the power of 50 cents, right? Look how much you would generate in each unit and across 6 units. 25, 50, what's the 1? Get 1% more repeat customers in each store. Your annual customer count is 275,000. Get 1% more. It's 2,750 more customers at $10 each. It's another 27.5 per unit, another 165 across 6 units. This, again, is strategic clarity at its finest and at its clearest representation. The little things are the big things. Reduce complexity. Take control of what controls your time. Every person on this call today is stressed by time. You're probably looking at your clock right now. You said 35 minutes, or when is this going to end? Well, here's the deal. We're drowning in information and starving for knowledge, all of us, right? So manage your to-do list creep. Here's how you do it. Limit your daily to-do list to a 3x3 Post-it. If you can't fit everything on a list this size, how are you possibly going to do it all in one day, right? Think about it. My suggestion is every day look at your list and say, what are the 3 most and the 1 must? What's the 3 most important things I need to do today? And what's the 1 must of those 3 things that has to be accomplished? It's really that simple and really that hard, as opposed to a list of 27 different things that you never get to and it just stresses you out at the end of the day. If you get the 3 most important things done and the 1 must out of that list, you're either 7 things ahead at the end of the week or 21 things ahead. Either way, you're doing good. Number 3, talent density. Servant leadership and talent scout are the key elements of this. Businesses are ecosystems, and each team member's responses and abilities grow in response to the people you surround them with. And that's a fact each and every day. So recognize that every one of your stores is an ecosystem. If you want to improve the customer experience, you start by improving the employee experience. Companies don't build business, they build people. People build business. Start with a strong culture. So let's talk about the 800-pound gorilla, staffing. If any of you on this call think, okay, he's got a secret he's going to share here relative to finding and hiring great people. I don't have that secret. Nobody does. If somebody knew it, it wouldn't be a secret, A. And B, if only I had it, I would be beaming this webinar from my private island in Hawaii. That's how valuable it would be. So there is no secret, but the first thing we need to do is to stop the leakage, right? Retention. That's the one thing I can teach you on how to focus on. Think about the numbers in a restaurant. If you have 40 employees, you have 100% turnover, and it costs $1,000 to hire a new person. National Restaurant Association estimates it could be as high as $4,000 per person. I'll say 1,000. That means you're spending $40,000 a year, hard costs, in finding, developing, training new people. If you have a 10% profit, well, that means that you have to generate $400,000 in sales to pay for that turnover. Look at the number at the bottom. It's a fact that we can spend up to 72 days of profit just to cover turnover expenses. So while we hear that labor is our biggest expense, in fact, if we could minimize turnover by 10%, 20%, it would be huge opportunities for us. I'll come back to this slide in just those 2 slides in just a second. So a couple of things you can do. Show appreciation each and every day. It's a huge tell if your recognition program occurs every 2 weeks and it's called a paycheck. Be so positive that negative people don't want to be around you. Now, you can't just be positive and cheery and not get results. You have to get results too. But I think that in the long run, when it comes to staffing and hiring, you have to focus on keeping the good people that you have. And the fact is, it doesn't get easier. You just get better at it. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn at Jim Sullivan, you can see my posting every day on how we can get better at retention. And also I share best hiring practices, of which there really are no best or better ones today, because the challenges are much bigger. This program isn't about staffing, but everything that we do is about staffing. I would say your job is not to find the right team, but to get the team right. Let's look at our 4th area. Our 4th best practice, habitual consistency. Be brilliant at the basics. Service mapping, focus on the shift. Look, you've got 14 shifts a week in any restaurant, any store. 56 shifts a month, 168 shifts every quarter, 672 shifts in a year. So I suggest the first thing you do is set quarterly goals based on key result areas. Let's say a key result area or a key performance indicator. Let's say your quarterly goal is to raise sales $30,000. 2, break your quarterly goals into period or monthly goals. That means your monthly goal is $10,000 in sales to get to that 30,000. 3, break down your period goals into shift goals. Okay, so if your goal is to raise $10,000 this month in sales, and you have 56 shifts a month, well, that means you have to raise sales $178 more per shift, and you'd hit that $10,000 in higher sales this month, and that $30,000 in higher sales this quarter if you're consistent with it. Makes sense. Next thing you need to do is have a pre-shift meeting to share those goals with your team. If you don't give your team members a shift plan, they're going to presume you don't have one, and they'll substitute their own. Post-shift meeting. Post-shift meeting, tie in your pre-shift goals and re-recruit your team. Make sure you take a minute, your GMs take a minute to thank the person for what they did that shift. Show that appreciation. This is a retention moment. It only takes you 30 seconds to do this. But the post-shift meeting is often overlooked, usually never done. And it's a great, great tool for you to keep good people with you. Finally, identify and share best practices and continuously improve. If you don't do things in step 4, remember, explanation gaps lead to execution gaps. Service mapping, this is nothing really new. You've probably seen this before. It's sometimes called moments of truth. It's sometimes called customer contact points. But if you look at the numbers there, chronologically map the experience that your customers or your guests have with your restaurant or with your store. Ask yourself, where am I good at each of these? Do I have the right people working for me in the right place? What does a good first impression look like? Where are we? Are we good? Are we mediocre? Are we not so good? On the right-hand side, you can see the bigger questions. What would be considered mediocre versus excellent service? And which of these blocks present immediate opportunities immediate opportunities for improvement in our restaurants or stores? Where are the combustion points? Where is the process likely to break down? Where is the process likely to break down due to team members? Look, you don't improve service in general. You improve service in specific. Service mapping is a great tool to help you do just that. The other way to create habitual consistency is to really look at what you're doing before you visit your store, during the visit, and after the visit. Again, I will direct you to a couple of resources because we don't have the time to get into this in great depth, but you don't just drop in on a store and visit it. You're not visiting a store, you're visiting people. So prepare, choose your focus. You don't focus on everything when you visit a store. Have a specific focus so that you can improve it. You can look at what should in general be going on before, during, and after the visit. But here's your baseline. When you leave that restaurant, did you leave it better than you found it? So let me just highlight for a quick second here a program. Let me just shield this program because it's a good one. Those of you who are interested in finding out ways to improve your multi-unit leadership abilities, whether you're a new multi-unit leader or you've been doing it for 15 years, or for those of you who are looking to direct your team toward a course. I just finished this course, creating it with my partners at DiscoverLink. It's called Multi-U 2.0. My rationale is school is never out for the pro. If you like these ideas we're talking about today and you want to go on a deeper dive on how to manage time, how to be better as a strategic thinker, how to be better as a critical thinker, how to understand situational leadership more, how to get the most out of store visits. Imagine an e-learning program that combines video, that combines text, that combines examples, that combines interactions, questions, and a digital workbook that you can use to track your progress and go on a deeper dive on each of the concepts. This is what MU 2.0 does. At the end, I'll show you a code that you can use and you can get 25% off of it. And it's only $299 per person. And that, my friends, looking at the course and knowing what's in it is a great deal if you're interested in it. So I'll move on to the rest of the program now. Number 5, our 5th one, fierce resolve. Fierce resolve to get things done. So connect your quarterly goals to shift execution, which I talked about before. Backcast each quarter's goals and have relentless repeatability. Backcasting your next quarter. You've heard of forecasting. Backcasting works a little different. You start on the right-hand side, 90 days from now. If I want to have record sales or profits in my stores across my market, what would I need to do in reverse? Well, maybe team turnover would have to be 20% less than it was 90 days ago. If you think about backcasting, you start on the right-hand side with what your goals are, and then you work backwards. What is it going to take to make this happen? If you want to put it on a sheet of paper, a sheet of flip chart paper, draw a line across the middle, and on the right-hand side, start with 90 days from now, work your way backwards. Ask yourself what would have to happen. Companies like Marriott, companies like Disney use this on a regular basis to project and to define what the steps are that they need for the success. So it's when you're done with it, you really do have a forecast, but you began it by doing a backcast. In the MU 2.0, get into backcasting in a lot of detail and give you blank digital maps that you can use as well. So consider that if this intrigues you as a concept. It works, I know that. So how can you apply it? Consider it in the e-learning program. Finally, in terms of fierce resolve, continuous improvement, and intentional resolve. Remember, when we talk about leadership, the first person a multi-unit leader leads is themselves. So improving your own skill sets is really key going forward, as I talked about before. You can't have static skills, and hopefully the stuff we've talked about today gives you some indication of where you're strong, maybe where you have challenge areas and where you can improve. And, sharpen the saw always. If there's a program out there on leadership development that help you get better at what you're doing, take advantage of it. And, if you invest your time in it and you get better, stronger skill sets, stronger mindsets, and stronger tool sets, why wouldn't you go for it? Be a goal getter. One other question to ask yourself, I mentioned there was homework here. Here's another homework question. What do your best GMs and team members do on a consistent basis that your worst managers and team members fail to do? This is similar to the questions I asked earlier, and one that I'd like you to consider going forward too, because again, you don't improve your teams in general, you improve them in specific. So how do we close the gap between insight and action? Well, one thing you can do relative to staffing, you could start providing mobile access for people applying for jobs. 61% of all job applications in 2020 were done via a phone or tablet. So do you have that ability in your company right now? If not, consider it, because if there isn't ease of application, there'll probably be a lack of application. And again, questions equal answers again. So here are some questions I'll leave you with. Who are we as a company? These are questions you'd have to answer. What's our why? What and who do we aspire to be? Have we assessed reality as it is, or are we filtering it as we wish it would be? Look at the development programs you're doing. Are you implementing systems and designing a culture for today's team members, or a team member that no longer exists from 4 or 5 years ago? What are the things that are so important to our culture that if we stop doing them, it would hurt our brand? How do we operate? The key to staffing is to treat talent as the scarcer capital by creating a really great employee experience. Expand each team member's capacity through learning, and allow your team members to be human, not employees. If you want a better customer experience, as I said earlier, start by creating a better employee experience. And if you've got big problems or you want to solve bigger problems, intentional resolve is what did it. Look at the food safety issue in the restaurant business in the 80s and 90s. We applied intentional resolve to that as an industry, and we more or less, we haven't eradicated it, but we solved the problem. What if we put all of our resources, our thinking, and our time into creating an industry that people were striving to get into instead of struggling to get out of? We could do this collectively as an industry if we wanted to. So again, please consider, just to wrap this up right now, to respect your time, please consider Multi-U 2.0. Here's the link for it. And if you use the discount that's on the screen, you'll get 25% off that $299. If you take the course by May 24th, I'll tell you what, we're going to extend that to May 31. So if you take the course by the end of May with as many team members as you want, use the code CHART25 and you'll get 25% off the program. So I hate to end with a sales pitch, but it's a way to develop you and make you better. It's a way to take all the elements we talked about today in a little way to go in a deeper depth and expand who you are and what you're doing. That being said, I'd like to conclude this presentation, say thank you for your time today and open it up for any questions. Tara, thank you so much for allowing me to do this program here today. And I appreciate everyone being on the call. So visit us at multiunitleadership.com, sullivan.com, or please look at Multi-U 2.0 at the Discover link address that's on the screen.
Absolutely. Jim, thank you so much. And there have been some questions come in. Anyone who has additional questions, you can send it into either the chat section or the Q&A section. I'm reading both of them. Jim, the first question was, how do you hold the pre-shift and post-shift meetings in an industry where people are starting at all different times?
Yeah, well, that's a great question and not an uncommon one. So you have staggered shifts. Everybody does. Somebody comes in 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there. You might only have 2 members at this time, 3 more come in. There's no reason. The problem with that is you're thinking the pre-shift meeting has to be 5 or 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be. A pre-shift meeting could be 2 minutes. It could be 1 minute. It could be 30 seconds. Somebody comes in by themselves in 15 minutes after everybody else. You do a 30-second one-on-one with them. The key is to write down what your goals are for the shift. You can either put them on the screen, you can put them on a tablet, you can write them on a whiteboard. And whatever those goals are, you bring that person to that board. Say, here's our goals for the shift. How do you think we can get to getting that done? So everybody has staggered shifts. Do 2 or 3 at a time. If it means you have to do 4 different 30-second or 1-minute pre-shift meetings, believe me, there's 5 minutes of time you waste talking about yesterday's baseball game or Dancing with the Stars that you could apply to improving your team.
Terrific. And we also have, 2 more questions. The first one is thoughts on multi-unit leaders doing a virtual pre-shift with GMs daily, semi-weekly, weekly?
Yeah, I think a key thing is to do that on a regular basis. If the question is how often should you be doing it, I think it should be done on, you know your team better than I do. So if it makes sense to do it on a weekly basis, great. What I've seen is twice a month. I don't know if that's bi-weekly or bi-monthly. It's probably bi-weekly. Doing it twice a month, and one of those meetings tends to be one that isn't just goal-oriented and business-oriented, but we talk about personal challenges and things that have been going on, especially in the last year, but we could carry that forward too. So not always having just a work-focused and performance-based agenda, but a development-based agenda and a personal-based agenda too. But how's everybody doing? What have we learned this week? What's one thing you learned last week that we could all archive, track, and get better at? So twice a month.
Okay. One person asked, how long is the course Multi-Unit 2.0?
Well, if you sat down with it and went through the whole thing, seat time wise, it's about 3.5 hours. But the nice thing is you can go into the program, you can stop and come back. It remembers exactly where you were. It tracks you right there. You don't start all over again. And we strongly recommend as people go through it, it leads you through the 7 stages, that we give you application exercises at the end of each stage to use that week in your restaurant or in your store. So ideally, you could stretch that out for 7 weeks. You're not in front of your laptop for 7 weeks. Total time would be like 3.5 hours, but it gives you ways to apply it and then come back and apply it and then use that insight for the next stage.
Okay, I think that was it for questions, other than people are asking if this is recorded. Yes, it is recorded. It will be on the chart website by tomorrow. Jim, thank you so much. This was very, very informative. I really appreciate you taking your time to do this for Chart.
My pleasure. And I know it's not just Chart members on the call here today, but I'd like to give a special shout out to Chart, as I've been a member. I think I started in Chart when dinosaurs still walked the earth.
that means that I did too. So
it's been a while, but we love Chart. And those of you who don't even know what Chart is, and you're joining from my connections outside of Chart, Council of Hotel and Restaurant Trainers, chart.org. Get involved. It's awesome.
Okay. Bye, Jim. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you.